Have a
what's
go.
That, what's our meeting?
Episode 35, isn't it?
36.
Did you call it a meeting?
Yeah.
Meeting of the minds.
35, I think.
35.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, have a go. Let's see it.
Welcome everyone.
I might lose a job from this.
Welcome to episode 35 of the Racing Line podcast. This is
welcome.
No, I liked it. Shut up. I liked it.
This is our 2022 parliamentary election special.
You've just screwed it up now, mate. I don't know where the hell that went.
You ruined my train of thought when you jumped in, man. I had a good thing going.
Okay, start again. We'll start again, and then we'll cut it.
No, welcome was good. I liked it.
You like that? Welcome to episode 35 of the Racing Line podcast. I'm here with Anth and Harry, and we're here to firstly dissect what a great race it was at Catalunya. Guys, how are you going?
Good, mate.
Doing well, mate.
I'm really good, thank you. I'm ready to pass on my team leader status to Anthony to finish off the job because that was pretty lackluster.
All right, good evening, guys. Welcome to episode 35 of the Racing Line podcast. We've got a very pretty stacked podcast tonight, talking about a few different topics. We're going to start at the recent Catalunya Grand Prix that took place in Barcelona yesterday.
Guys, yeah, we forgot to add Michael to the party. Lol jokes.
Mixie is on indefinite hiatus at this current time, so he will come into the pod as a guest appearance whenever he feels like he wants to.
He just sent me a Richmond Tigers premiership documentary on Facebook.
He did. Anyway, we'll get back to the serious stuff. I got it too. So we're going to start talking about the Formula One that took place last night, early hours of this morning in the Circuit de Catalunya in Barcelona. Some interesting talking points from the season so far, and I think there's probably a few interesting points to dissect there. We'll talk about the Supercars race weekend at Winton that again took place this weekend, and we'll also have a little bit of a discussion about the recent Bathurst 12-hour, and if we get to the Bastianini effect in MotoGP, we'll see how long that takes us. But boys, we'll start with Formula One.
Out, yeah?
No, but yours is. I've lost your audio. I've lost your visual. H.
Is it mine?
Yeah, it's yours. That's good. We're going to just push on without you, Joey. H, interesting race this morning. Last week you spoke about how it might be a little bit of a floppy fish, dead fish, in relation to the difficulty of this passing. But what did you make of the whole race?
It was interesting due to the heat, how many pit stops there were for each team. I think most teams had a 3 or 4 stop strategy, which was probably the first time I've seen that in a very long time. Some really good performances. I'll shout out Mr. Russell.
Yeah.
Mate, his defending when he was in P1 from Max was, even though Max didn't have DRS, he still had the pace on him and just wouldn't let him past.
He's been a shining light of the season, I think.
I think he has. He's hit the ground running in that team. But yeah, performances that weren't so great. Probably Pierre, who did absolutely nothing all weekend. Have to say it, Daniel.
Your boy, mate.
Pretty bad weekend.
I'm going hard this weekend when you give me the chance.
Mate, I don't want to know about your bedroom activities, but Joey, what do you think, mate?
I didn't think the race was too bad, to be honest. I thought it was quite an interesting weekend. Sorry if I sound a bit nasally. I've still had a man flu for last week. I thought that realistically Leclerc looked amazing. And like Max said after the race, if it had been smooth sailing for them, he would have run away with that pretty comfortably, it looked like. However, that wasn't the case. And, it's a long championship, but we leave Catalunya with Max in the lead of the championship, which is amazing considering he's had 2 retirements. Other than that, I thought Ocon really looked strong, which was,
Alpine was strong in general. I think even
Alpine was strong, but like over the last couple of weeks, I've really noticed how well Ocon has looked, and I'm like, man, if our boy is gonna get a seat there next year, I don't know who's gonna move, because Ocon looked good. Fernando had a great race from last on the grid to finish in the points as well. I mean, it's amazing how, if you look at it objectively, how much better they look as a team than McLaren at the moment, who is sort of like their direct competitor.
Well, I don't know. I feel like McLaren have had some pretty good races of late, and this was kind of a bit of a setback for them.
I feel like that the Alpine car is just, it is probably not as good at the track, so the McLaren is really good, but like its baseline, like
it's less fickle.
Yeah, so it can perform relatively well everywhere. Whereas
the McLaren struggles in heat.
But yeah, that's right. Like in the heat, like it's weird. Like it just loses all its pace.
Yeah.
And I was surprised because they look so good there in testing. I thought they'd come and probably be best of the rest, and that really wasn't the case. I mean, I was pretty impressed this weekend with Mick Schumacher as well, which I was pleasantly surprised with. And that was interesting, considering Haas literally have not updated that car at all for this race. The only team who didn't bring updates.
Yeah.
But I mean, the baseline for that car in testing there was pretty good. So, I mean, maybe they knew they didn't really need him there. And then just quickly, my honorable mentions of apathy was probably Vettel, all the Williams drivers. And yeah, to be honest, I think Pierre, because Tsunoda looked like he had Pierre's number probably for the first weekend, like complete weekend that we've seen in a long time.
I don't think Pierre's had a great season so far. He hasn't really done much.
He hasn't, but I feel like a lot of it is like there's definitely problems with that car that both drivers are alluding to. But like he always looks better than Tsunoda until this weekend was like the first one. It was like noticeably.
I think the problem is, I think a problem with Toro Rosso right now is that there's definitely other teams this year that have made a bigger jump than them, like Ferrari, who they were somewhat competitive.
They set the bar so high as well last year. That's the thing.
Well, McLaren's still better than them. Alpine has definitely made the jump. Alfa Romeo has made a jump, so I think they're probably the team that hasn't made as much of a jump as some of those other midfield teams, and they're kind of getting left behind, and that is making it harder for, particularly someone like Gasly to show his value. But a few honorable mentions that I wanted to make before we got into some of the talking points. Number one, I think that Nick de Vries has to get an honorable mention because he came in FP1 and was faster than Latifi, which is...
That's not surprising, man.
Yeah.
It's not surprising, but I think that kind of... We've said it a few times as well, that Latifi probably has to go regardless of the money that he's bringing into the team. That says a lot to me, that you've got a rookie coming in for their first run, FP1, and he's faster than someone who's been racing for 2 years now. So I just wanted to mention that. But a few things that were surprising but also enjoyable to see. Valtteri Bottas, we spoke about him a couple of weeks ago. I mean, this guy, he looks like a new guy. And it was made, the comment was made on the broadcast, but he's got a new lease of life in Alfa Romeo. He's beaten Hamilton a fair few times this year. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from him.
No pressure, mate. He's in a pressure-free environment.
That's right. Well, you know what? It's
and
good
the car's
to see
got
him
genuine
performing.
pace.
Yeah, that's right. And it harkens back to the performances that he was putting in at Williams before he moved to Mercedes, and he was actually extracting more from the car than was expected, and it's really good to see. But I think the key talking point for us tonight, boys, and I don't know if you guys want to have this conversation, but I want to push it because I think it's a big talking point right now. Is
Danny Rick? Or can I quickly just bring something up before we go into the Danny Rick's sweepstakes?
Yeah.
I sort of want to also
sweepstakes. Do you know what a sweepstake is?
Yeah, but it seemed like a cool word, but I didn't think of it properly. I want to quickly
contextualize.
I want to give it on. I'm not a teacher, guys. Calm down. I want to give an honorable mention to the whole Mercedes team for when Lewis got his puncture on the first lap and said we should just retire the car and save the engine for not giving up.
What a sook, mate! What a
for
sook.
not giving up.
Oh, don't even start me on sooks.
And then bringing back what was a really good fifth place in hindsight, and really
To his credit,
the
he did
first
race
time
well after
dude,
that
I'm
point.
telling you, like, that's what I'm going to say. Like, he came back and he was probably put in the best stint that he's put together all year. And that car looked like a genuine pace until they had the water leak. So, I mean, I think Toto said it after the race. He said there was no chance that we were going to box him anyway, because we we're going to use it as a testing session no matter what, even if it didn't pan out that way. But yeah, I think it was actually really nice to finally see Mercedes with a little bit of, like, not total pace, but they had a bit of,
they were more competitive.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and it's always good to see that. And George, man, like, George surprised me so much. Not surprised, but like, it was good to see him holding back Max and sort of having a bit of a jostle, because we know what the boy has proven over the last couple of years. And then sort of his start of the season with Mercedes hasn't been ideal and through no fault of his own. So I just love to see him get a car under him that can really take it to the best.
You know what was interesting to see? Obviously, the car's less competitive, but it was obviously he was in front of Verstappen, so he didn't have DRS. And when Verstappen didn't have DRS, I thought it would be a lot easier for Verstappen or for the Red Bull to get past the Mercedes than it was. So obviously, there's a little bit of aero wash that you've got to take into consideration. I mean, when you're watching the onboards of Verstappen going around the corner 3, turn 3, you could see how much downforce he was losing. But regardless of that, that car wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, which is good. It means that they're getting
that Red Bull breezes past Ferraris.
Yeah.
So like for it not to be able to breeze past the Mercedes really bodes well for them, I think.
I think their stock is definitely rising, which is good to see. I think that's a good point, Joe. I think obviously there hasn't been a whole lot for Mercedes to be excited about, considering how lofty expectations over the last decade or so. I think George Russell is definitely a bright spark. And I think his resilience, just from being based in a team like Williams for so many years, means that he's quite optimistic. And when he does get an opportunity to scrap with anybody, you can see how good he is at just kind of staying ahead of a car and scrapping and trying to extract the most from a situation, even in an underperforming car, which was really good to see. I think the Hamilton comments were...
they're just fun.
It was fun. I mean, obviously, if you don't like him...
fuel for the haters.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't like him, I think you're going to read into it more than if you do, because from a logical point of view, I can understand the logic of that as well. But it's interesting to see. I mean, we made the comment in the preseason that if Russell is as competitive as Hamilton, or if he's trumping Hamilton this year, what does that mean for the world champion? Well, that conversation is going to have to pick up a little bit of steam, because George is driving phenomenally well, and Hamilton, some through his own fault, some through circumstances out of his control, kind of has to pick up the pace a little bit. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Harry.
I thought in the last few races, he was going that way, but I think today's showed that he still obviously can do it, but the hunger's still there, even after his little whinge. So I don't know. I think we'll judge it later on in the season, see where the two guys are at.
Well, let's move into the key topic of conversation as it pertains to Formula One right now. And it's, interesting for us because he's our hometown boy. He's been racing in Formula One for probably the majority of the time that we've been actively following it. He's, now the longest serving Australian driver in Formula One history, and it's Daniel Ricciardo. And he was very ordinary this week and was easily outdone by his teammate who has tonsillitis. So
that has nothing to do with it. Anything.
Yeah, and
come on, listen, it's going to have something. If you're not at 100%, you're obviously not racing at 100%. So we were giving Ricciardo the benefit of the doubt when he came back from COVID. So you've got to give Lando a little bit of benefit when he's racing with tonsillitis and sneezing in his helmet. I mean, it's hardly the ideal situation to be racing in and having a fever. So, I mean, we'll give it the credence that, whatever you want to do with it. But I think that it was a pretty underwhelming performance. As an Australian fan, it's interesting because you kind of don't want to accept that there is a decline. But as a fan of McLaren, the team, I've kind of lost most of my patience now, and I'm thinking about what they're going to do in 2023, because the reality is I don't want Ricciardo there next year if he's going to be performing the way that he is.
Yeah,
because
well, here's
there's
the
no
long and
benefit
short. The
to
long
it.
and short of it really is that the car is suboptimal, right? And yes, Lando is performing better in the suboptimal car, and that's all well and good. And I'm surprised how much better he is performing, but doesn't take anything away from that. The car is not what it needs to be.
Yeah, but we've spent the whole like Formula One is all about beating your teammate, and we are aware that there is a pecking order and a hierarchy.
But we have a
teams
9-time world champion who can't beat his new teammate,
and I've just made the point
in
that
the
there's going
best
to be
team in the on the grid.
And the point has just been made that at the end of this year, there's going to have to be some serious conversations about what Mercedes do.
I don't think so.
What Hamilton's going to do.
This year is such a like a year of testing for these new concepts. I don't think anyone's.
But we in the off season we had the conversation that it's a new year. Everybody starts with a blank canvas.
But we're professional shit talkers. That's what we are.
I'm not talking shit. I'm just being objective to the fact
we don't know how hard it is to adapt to a new totally new concept of car.
Listen,
and Lando is a great young racer. Like I'm not disputing that. But if we're going to sack that, if you're considering getting rid of Danny Rick from McLaren, and we haven't even had the conversation that the car, for whatever reason, is suboptimal.
Regardless, if the car was the best car on the grid, this conversation still does not change, because it's got nothing to do with the performance of the car. It's about the performance of the driver in relation to the teammate.
Yeah, but the performance of the driver might not be comfortable in this piece of shit car. Like, that's what I'm saying.
The driver hasn't been comfortable for 2 years.
And the car's been shit for 2 years.
The car was fighting for third in the World Championship last year. It won a race. It should have won
Danny
2
Rick
races.
won the race.
That's
and for the second half of last year, it was actually considerably poor.
This is the point I'm going to make, right? Lando, for the last 2 years with Carlos Sainz, was for the most part on par. They kind of back and forth. There was a good back and forth. Now, you can make the claim that he has improved, and I would probably make that assertion as well. But Ricciardo has had nothing on him all year. Even last week, when he beat him in Q1, I'm like, okay, this is a chance for him to kind of ride that momentum and beat him in qualifying. And the same thing keeps happening. Qualifying, he's a few tenths off. Sometimes it's more than a few tenths. And in the race, moving back.
Have you looked at their lap times from today?
I haven't.
There was, I think, between their fastest laps, I think the most of the difference there was 4 tenths.
Okay, so that's 4 tenths. That's fantastic.
But that's the fastest lap. That's and that's race. We know what race pace does.
4 tenths is huge.
Yeah, but in race pace, not really, depending on strategy, etc.
4 tenths for a fastest lap is huge. Should be able to bang out. Each driver can bang out one fast lap. Yep. 4 tenths for a fastest lap is huge, man.
Not really. Depending on where they are on the track, depends on who's in front of them. Depends on.
Okay, well, let's say that Lando is 2 tenths faster a lap. How long was that race? Was it 50 laps?
66.
Okay, do 2 tenths times 66. You're going to have a pretty big pretty big margin between the two drivers. And listen, I'm not even worried about this one race. Like, if it was one race, I'd say it's one race. This has looked like a trend now for the better part of a year. You guys made the claim in the middle of last year that in the second half of the year, in year 2, Ricciardo picks up the pace. Well, we are 6 races into year 2 now, and the trend is not changing at all. And the interesting thing is McLaren are going to get to the point where they're going to have to consider next year in the driver market. And we're talking about young drivers like Gasly.
Yeah, but the thing is, McLaren's
other thing, he's on $20 million, isn't he? Isn't he on a $20 million pay packet?
Who?
To becoming 12th?
Who?
Ricciardo.
And what are they going to pay Gasly when he comes? Less than that?
Less than 20 million?
No,
Gasly's not going to McLaren. He hasn't performed this year at all.
I cannot see. The only thing I can see changing in the driver market as of now is Vettel not being there. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's literally all I
Man,
can.
if you
I can
think that
see at the
McLaren,
moment.
I honestly think if you think McLaren's
Yes,
keeping Ricciardo for another
McLaren's
year,
biggest
you are
problem
you are.
is McLaren's biggest problem is their car. Like
Have you heard?
they have to admit to themselves
Listen,
that car has a fundamental problem.
I understand that the car's not perfect. I'm not arguing that. Like, I'm not saying the car should be up the front. I'm not saying that Lando and Ricciardo should be up the front. What I'm saying is, if Lando is coming 9th and qualifying 9th and 8th, and Ricciardo is constantly finishing 12th, 11th, 10th,
But he's
qualifying
literally
out of
finishing
that.
usually one position behind him, maybe
He
two.
was, okay, well, he was 3 that last time.
Okay,
And
3 is actually not that much.
Even if he's Joe,
come on, man.
Have you? Hold on.
This like blatant like denial of a trend.
Dude, it's not
is
denial.
like
It's not even
starting
my
to piss me
team.
off.
I don't even give a shit. My team comes 18th and
Okay, if you're
19th
looking,
every week.
Then if you're looking at it objectively, how many points has Ricciardo scored this year?
I don't know, probably like
11.
15.
11. How many has Norris scored this year?
I don't know.
In 6 races.
How many?
39.
Okay, I'm not, dude. I didn't say that.
If that's
Ricciardo's
not a trend,
been better than Norris.
All right.
I'm saying the car, for whatever the reason.
yeah,
Okay,
but that argument doesn't
he might
stick,
be a
man.
better driver. He might be a better driver.
He's a better
but they
driver.
need-
That's the point I'm
okay,
trying to
he is.
make.
But like, what are you going to get a second better? He's not that far back to get rid of him. They need to work on the car together.
Joe,
As a
if
team,
he-
they need.
Joe, if he
Dude, the
can't,
problem
if
is
he
it's
can't
not like
even,
they're racing. They're not racing Red Bulls. They're not racing Ferraris.
yeah,
They're driving
Joe,
a McLaren
but-
that they hyped up to high heaven and has not lived up to
you
any
are making
results.
an argument that doesn't make sense. I'm not talking about
I'm
the
not.
car. The car isn't great. I'm talking about every single race. It's not even like they're splitting qualifying 60%, 40%. Right now, it's 100% 0.
No, it's not. It's
So you-
5-1. So
5-1. So let's go like a 90%, 10%. Big whooped. Okay. He is underperforming.
you need to calm down, mate. You
dramatically.
sound like Michael.
No, I'm being honest. Like you can't keep denying this. Like as a,
Yeah, but have you
Rep-
looked at the races that he either hasn't finished? He's had car issues. He's had damage.
yeah, okay. He's had a car issues.
Like, yeah.
Which
I
one?
don't. What do you mean?
Which
Which
one?
one? In
Which race did he
qualifying,
have car issues?
in qualifying last week,
Okay.
his gearbox went.
Mhm.
There was
No, that wasn't last week, 2 weeks ago.
yeah. Well, the last race
Mhm.
today. Apparently, he had issues with the rear slipping out.
Mate, I'll be honest with you. He can have issues with the rear tires. Like everybody was having issues with the rears, but that's
no, I think the
part of it.
McLaren was
Yeah,
worse.
but dude, we had a conversation in Australia when we all admitted that he should have finished ahead of Norris, but we said there's no point of them risking a collision, flipping their positions, even though Norris was struggling.
Yeah, and what did I say then? I said he still wasn't ahead of Norris.
Yeah, but he wasn't because it's team orders.
Yeah, but he still wasn't. If he was
But
if he
you're
was
not
ahead of
listening to
Norris, if he qualified better,
yeah.
he would have been ahead of him. But he
But
wasn't.
my argument is your argument is that he should
One spot.
you're arguing he should have been. He should have. They should get rid of him next year. That's your argument.
My argument
We're
is
saying that regardless of if he's better than Norris or not, getting rid of him doesn't fix the problem that McLaren has.
no, but McLaren needs
McLaren has to deliver their drivers a competitive car.
Yes,
That's
but
their obligation.
I understand that, but how do you deliver a more competitive car? One of the issues that you can't have is one driver who's constantly outperforming the other.
But he's not that far off. They're
But he's
very
off.
close every
So
time.
he's off.
Yeah, but one of them's always going to be
5-1.
better.
5-1.
But-
You've made the argument for me.
Dude, one of them is always going to be fucking better. How hard is it for you to understand? But it's not who's better. It's how close they are in terms of times. And as a team, they pretty much have bad races and good races and bad qualifyings and good qualifying literally within 1 or 2 positions of each
Yeah.
other.
But
So it's
within
a
those-
consistent thing. Yeah. And within the team fight, Norris is finishing ahead. We're not disputing that. But the trend of good race, bad race, good for qualifying, bad qualifying is a team problem.
I understand the issue
Because
with the car.
if Lando was coming first in every race and Daniel Ricciardo was coming second, you'd say he's a good second driver and we're going to keep him for next season. This wouldn't even be an argument.
Okay.
But because they're
So-
finishing 9th and 11th or 5th and 6th and then 9th and 11th and then 10th and 12th or something like that, it's somehow a bigger problem than it is.
Well, I don't think
Problem
Daniel. I don't think Daniel Ricciardo is in at McLaren to be a second driver.
It's not. McLaren's problem is that they went into they always overhype their car. They always talk so much smack at the start of seasons, and then their fans have got this sort of hyped up mentality when the season starts, and then they come to race 1 or race 2 and then losing to Alpines, and they're like, what's going on?
Listen, their car, listen, I'll be honest with you, their car is not that bad. It's fickle. Yes, sometimes it performs better than others. When it performs well,
dude, it's shit.
No, it's not shit. It's not shit.
A car that can't perform at one track and then can perform, it is shit. No, it has major problems because they can't understand it. That's the problem. They can't understand. They can't understand their car.
Yeah, through not through their own performance, through other cars.
At the pace that they're going, they're not going to finish fourth in the championship. No, because at the rate we're seeing Alpine come up, they're not going to finish out of Alpine.
Alpine's had so many issues like DNFs and etc. That's the only reason why Alpine's not ahead of them.
So let me pull this. Okay, well that's about their performance. You're talking about this car being a poor performing car. DNFs is due to the performance of other teams as well. But let's say this: if Lando's the top driver now, and you've said that he's performing better than Ricciardo, and he's got 39 points. If Daniel Ricciardo has 20 points, which is half of the haul of Lando, right? They're closer to third in the championship.
Yeah.
Okay. However, he's got a quarter of the points, man.
His is the only car out of the two that's had mechanical issues.
With all due respect, for the last 18 months, I've been hearing the Daniel Ricciardo, this poor guy had this, poor guy had that, poor guy had this. In qualifying for 18 months, he's been underperforming.
But he's never been a strong qualifier. He's never been a strong qualifier.
He has been a good qualifier.
He's only got 3 pole positions.
Yeah, but think about the cars that he was driving. When was he ever driving a car that could beat a Mercedes?
He's 2014. What I have
he was beating Vettel. He was beating Hülkenberg. He was beating Kvyat when he was racing against him. He is a good qualifier. He's an ace driver. Well, he was an ace driver, and I don't think his head or heart's in it anymore.
He's my problem is we are just over 1 quarter through the season, right? There is so long to go. There is so long to go, right? And this is the same thing I have with you and Michael and the whole Jack Miller thing, is that when we have barely scratched the surface of the potential of the cars, of going to these new tracks, of getting, dude, when we get 3 quarters through the season and we're having this conversation, yeah, I'll admit it 100%, but we are so, we haven't even, we just got to Europe. Get to halfway through the season and then we'll have this conversation.
With all due respect, Formula One moves faster than that because by halfway through the season, the lineups for next year will be made.
But you know what? Then I can't convince you because your heart is already out.
But you don't look at trends, but like we can make the same argument about the whole Jack Miller scenario. Everything I say about Miller is based on historic trend.
It's not historic trends because I'm not going to get into this right now. This is an F1 podcast. But all I'm saying is that let's get to a place where we're not having car problems. We're not having these, when the teams actually understand the cars, and then we have these conversations. But jumping the gun.
But like you keep talking about the car, right? And my argument has nothing. The car
is not up to snuff.
Okay,
look,
that's the biggest problem.
Okay,
he's not gelling with the car. It's 2 years in a row. He's not gelling with the car, right?
Yeah. So
he's still got a race win last year.
Yeah.
Still got a race win in the second half of last season. He outscored Lando considerably.
Okay,
so no.
All right, keep going. I was talking. Yep.
We're 6 races in, and we're having this I'm with Joe. We wait till halfway through and we see.
Yeah. Okay. So at halfway through, if the same thing's happening and he's been unlucky for another 6 races, do you then concede? Because this is the other thing, right? Let's use your shit car analogy, Joe. Okay. I watched someone in a Williams have a shit car for 3 years and constantly perform. And every time I watched him, Russell. I'm like, okay, this guy's going to be a gun. This guy's going to be a gun. Doesn't matter how shit the car was, he was constantly performing. The eye test didn't lie. You got Ricciardo now in a shit car, okay? A car that bloody Norris finished on the podium win, okay? Shit car.
Man, the best race Norris had, Ricciardo had mechanical gremlins. That was the best race.
He hit Sainz.
Whatever. He had some kind of problem. That was the best race that.
But that's still self-inflicted somewhat. Like it's a racing incident.
It was a racing incident. I'm not disputing it was a racing incident, but it's not like. Anyway, I mean, I feel like you're jumping the gun so premature. Like I did not come in here expecting to have a conversation about Danny Ricciardo's Formula One future after this race. Like I was like, yeah, car's not that good.
Mate,
It's
the
hot.
whole race, I was
Dude,
watching.
if Norris looked even somewhat competitive this race as well, because he had a nothing race, I would be like, you know what, where's Danny Rick? But I saw Norris was like what, 9th or 8th or something.
He was
and
9th.
Danny Rick was he was 9th, and Danny Rick was like 11th.
Was 12th.
Okay, so Norris got 2 points this race, and Danny Rick got nothing from whatever scenarios and strategies that you can conjure. It wasn't like a Norris even made a blip on anyone's mind during the race. They were piss poor to get, like, the team was piss poor this weekend.
Can I just throw one other thing at you? Just like we'll talk about the whole, like you talked about Imola being Lando's best race and then Ricciardo being unlucky, right? That can work. I will give you that.
Yeah, but if you let the season run long enough, you'll get these swings and roundabouts, and they'll sort of match up a bit more.
When we talk about Lando's best race, that in some, like, there was fortune and there was unluckiness for Ricciardo in that race, like taking that out of the equation. Do you know what the qualifying margin was in that race between Lando and Ricciardo? Have a guess. And what would you say would be a bad margin for two teammates?
Man, anything over 1/10, I think, is a bad margin.
Anything over 1/10. What would you say, Harry, is a bad margin?
Yeah, 1 or 2 tenths.
Do you know how far behind he was?
Half a second?
From Lando? He was 6 tenths. 6 tenths in qualifying. So regardless of...
So you're taking your sample size from one quali.
And I'm just saying, is because you said that was Lando's best race and he got lucky in that race. So I'm saying, regardless of what happened to Ricciardo on the first lap, there was already a big performance discrepancy with Lando qualifying 3rd and him qualifying 6th.
Look, I'm not disputing he's underperforming, but I think writing him off from Formula One for good is going a step too far.
But I'm saying maybe he's not McLaren. Maybe he needs to.
What is McLaren? McLaren at the moment is a subpar team. That's what you have to get through your head.
Yeah, but if you're a subpar team, you're not, like, if you're a subpar team, whatever that means to you, and you've got someone like Pierre Gasly, who over the last couple of years has been performing fairly well, except for this year, for example, right? He's an ace. I would say that he's, at this stage, he's got more to prove. Well, not more to prove, but he's got more to give to McLaren than Ricciardo.
I don't know, mate, because we saw Pierre in a big team and he faltered massively.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, it's true. There's definitely that argument too. But with what Ricciardo's doing and with how, like, he's off it. Like, he's just off it. Now, I'm not saying that he's stopped. Like, I love him.
You might have any confidence in this new car. That's all it could be, a confidence thing.
100%. And I think that's what we saw today with the rear. He just had no confidence in that car.
I'm telling you, out of the only driver, I think, at the moment in these 6 races who has performed in a way that I'm genuinely surprised how bad it has looked. Has
Carlos
probably
Sainz.
been, Carlos Sainz. Well, Carlos Sainz is fine because he just signed a massive new deal anyway, but he hasn't looked that good. Is Seb and Stroll? They're the only people.
Yeah, and I agree. They have to go. They're underperforming.
And that's it.
And Latifi.
That's
Latifi's
it.
bloody spent $5 million already of the team's budget for fixing chassis. But I don't know, boys. I was watching the race last night.
It's a storm in a teacup.
Yeah, but you know what the other thing is, Joe? Like, I watch the race every week, and
but you watch the race through McLaren's eyes.
I get that. I get that, but I watch every lap, every qualifying session, evaluating those two against each other.
Do you know how
and it's
much
becoming
I would
pretty
love
glaring.
to follow a team like McLaren, who has 40 something points.
I agree. Yeah, I get that. And you don't know how much I would love to have Ricciardo bloody being the number 1 driver and absolutely killing it. But from an objective point of view, I'm becoming less and less convinced.
Yeah, I'm his biggest fan, you know that. And if he doesn't turn it around this year, I don't think they'll replace him for 23. I just don't think there's anyone that they could possibly replace him with that would perform better in the car. Because I think Pierre is not at Lando's level. I think Daniel on his day is better than Pierre. Would you be surprised
if the trajectory continues to trend the way that it is if he was out of McLaren next year? Would that surprise you?
I don't know where he goes because I can't see him stepping down to another team.
Aston Martin, if they get rid of Seb, 100%. Because he's a big name still.
Dude,
he's a big name.
McLaren at the moment and I keep saying this, have to provide a stable car that can perform week in, week out. And when they have that platform, we can consistently see at least one of them performing at a consistent baseline, then you know that it's all the driver thing. But until you can provide something stable for your drivers, even if it's a car that is not as has lower peaks but also higher troughs, it has a at least then the driver can consistently say, okay, this is exactly what I've got underneath me. Yeah, but until then, the cars, dude, if they could go out in the shade and the car would fucking fly, and then if the sun broke cover and it became a hot day, that car, they could literally go from like 4th and 5th on the grid to last. Like that's how
I get that.
particular that car is.
I get that,
so
but
until you can provide a stable basis for your drivers, what confidence can you have? Maybe Lando can drive a more unstable car.
I genuinely think he's lacking confidence in that car, and maybe in himself at the moment, because he can't extract the pace. And I think that's where the issue is.
Do you think some of his comments recently and the rhetoric that is coming out from his interviews would suggest that he might be kind of at the end of not the end of his straw with Formula One, but kind of he realizes that he might have been in it for long enough now, and he's kind of looking elsewhere?
He addressed this last week.
Well, when you have a driver who hasn't won a championship saying that they're at peace not winning a championship, that kind of tells me
that's nearly every F1 driver in history.
I think
is at peace with not winning it.
But that's nearly every F1 driver in history needs to be at peace with not winning it.
I think that comment was essentially, I know if I don't get given the car, I'm not going to win. It was not the DR of old where I'm going to be world champion. I'm getting no matter what. I think it's now, right. if I can't get the car, and that comes from maturity. If I can't get the car, I'm not going to do it.
But there's also come from,
dude, there are this year there's 17 drivers who have come to that realization already.
Yeah, but I also, Joe, but it's one thing to be realistic that you won't be able to achieve it this year, but it's another thing to be at peace never achieving it. When definitely, mate, if you were to look at Ricciardo in his Red Bull times, the Red Bull was nowhere near as effective as the Mercedes, but until it was mathematically not a possibility, he was charging to the tune that he could potentially still be world champion.
Yeah, but that could be an indictment of McLaren, because maybe when he went there, that he was promised, or he believed that they could actually build a car that could compete with the big teams. And we know that that's not happening this year. And maybe he's like, well, if it doesn't happen this year, then it might not happen ever. Like that could just.
But even within like you can say it's McLaren. Even if he was to be the world champion of McLaren between those two drivers,
there's no such thing.
I know. Hypothetically, he's sucking right now at that.
Dude, but if there was a car that was good enough for Lando to be world champion, he would have a sniff. But the car isn't even.
He'd have to beat Lando. He'd have to beat Lando. And that's,
but maybe the car would be so good he could extract from it. The car would be so good for Lando to win, he could extract from it.
Maybe.
At the end of the day,
circles.
The dude's unperforming. We get that, but I have faith that I still have faith that he'll come good eventually.
I bought his T-shirt this year. That's how much I hate him, right?
Mate, look, I got his hat.
I still bought his shirt this year. I wore it to Bathurst last week, so it's not out of want or desire. It's just out of the timesheet doesn't lie at the end of the day, and that's kind of where
I'm with you. As I said, he's 100% not extracting the performance, and I do think the guy's having issues within himself. And I don't know, something's happening in quali, something's happening. He can't get the pace out. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting. Any other talking points from F1 that you guys wanted to? You reckon?
Oh,
yep.
I think
let's leave it there.
Yeah, all right.
Let's leave it there. I think we can keep flogging this horse, mate, till it loses all its skin. Let's start talking a bit about some supercars action from the weekend. So, a bit of racing at Winton. We had a.
Did you read my points?
I didn't. Do you want to facilitate this conversation, Joey?
Yeah, I just wrote some. I think a few key notes.
You're going to start with a welcome again.
Welcome to the Supercars part of this podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry. So my first sort of topic I wanted to discuss was I titled it "Waking Mr. Waters" because I was genuinely surprised, and not surprised. I was really happy to see the Cam Waters that we know exists, and he sort of through team performance as well as maybe a bit of himself. But I've also got to point a few ones down that I think can also link into this. For whatever reason, we haven't seen how good of a racer Cam Waters actually is this year. He's been involved in a few incidents, and sometimes just all the Tickford cars have really performed.
Tickford have underperformed this year again. I said a couple of weeks ago, right? Tickford this year have been on a downward trajectory, and I made the claim, I think in our last Supercars segment, that they had been just overtaken realistically by Walkinshaw, just in relation to team performance.
Well, here's the crazy thing. Waters is actually third in the championship, and Chaz has dropped to sixth.
Second.
Third.
Yeah.
Oh, D Pasquale might be ahead of him, actually.
Yeah, I think
still.
Okay. Yeah.
D Pack is still second.
Yeah.
Waters is third, and then Will Davidson, Reynolds, and then Mostert, because Walkinshaw have had 2 weekends to sort of forget.
Yeah. Do you think it's him waking up, or do you think it's the team?
No, I think it's
figuring something out.
I think it's that Tickford have been relatively good at Winton for
he's
the last couple of years.
He's never had a podium there before.
He hasn't, but they've never been bad there. It's not a bogey track to them, and they test their.
Mostert has had some good races at Winton in the past, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
when Mostert was at Tickford.
Was at Tickford, that's right.
Yeah.
So I feel like it could be a combination of many things, but to actually win the whole weekend, so 2 wins and a second, and to genuinely for it to be a race where he never looked like it was by accident that he was winning, and it never looked like that he didn't have a bit extra when Gizzer got close to him. I thought was awesome to see, and I don't even like Tickford, but I thought it was such a good weekend for him, especially.
I think the biggest thing for Waters this week, I argue that he's been underperforming this year. I think just the team has been that bad, and if you look at the all the cars as a whole, they've been pretty ordinary. But I think the biggest thing for Tickford was they've got on top of their qualifying pace, if only at Winton, and that has given him a springboard to win those races. Because in race 1, his qualifying pace was awesome, and his starts were awesome. So he put himself from the off in the best position to win the race. But we did see in race 1 that SVG definitely had the pace over him. He just couldn't get past. In race 2, SVG was able to get past on a spectacular move, and he won the race by 6 seconds. So the overall pace of the Tickford car race pace is still not at the level that it needs to be to compete or to chase down the Triple Eight. But as we saw in race 3, if Waters was able to stay ahead, and at the end, I have to give him some credit because Van Gisbergen came back with 3 new tyres and 3 fresher tyres, and he's still able to hold him out. But I think that it was more based on track position as opposed to the genuine pace of the car. And I think we've seen it before. We saw it last year in Townsville. If Waters has a lead over Van Gisbergen, then he does make it really hard for Gizzer to get through. And
he's very good leading from the front.
Really and this week we saw 2 out of 3 of those situations he was able to get the job done. And even in the second race when he did lose the position, he could have maybe moved across half a meter more to close off that space a bit more. But then I didn't really have much argument with that aggression either. So I think he had a really good race. I think the team might have unlocked a bit of qualifying pace, but there's still definitely some race pace that needs to be unlocked. Now, the other part of that debate is it Triple Eight that is that far ahead, or is it just SVG? And that's probably another.
I think it's Triple Eight, but it's SVG. I mean, I've
It's
conceded
Triple Eight,
the
but it's SVG.
like AAA is the best team on the grid. We're not disputing that.
So you're saying Feeney's not extracting the performance?
Well, Feeney's a rookie. Like I'm not
Yeah,
for where he is, he's actually
No,
exceeding my
Feeney's, yeah.
expectations.
I think Feeney probably proves the point that Triple Eight is performing really well, because if you look at him as your rookie, and
He's doing quite well.
he's doing better than Percat, he's doing better than Randall, like he's doing better
Perkat's
than
been trash.
yeah. So
The whole
I think-
team was trash this weekend.
I think yeah.
Waters was in the top 10, but
Mostert.
like sorry, Mostert was in the top 5 for 2 races. Like it wasn't trash, but it was
but
they're struggling.
Yeah.
But
think back to the
they-
first couple of rounds, but they were
but
challenging for wins.
these are the tracks that they struggle at every year. Like this is the part of the season when I just hide in my shell for a couple of weeks and then wait for us to.
They struggle at the kind of the rural tracks. Say they
windy
perform
track.
They perform on the
big
tracks
stage.
where there's a big TV audiences and everybody's there, but at the little bloody Queensland raceways and Winton raceways and that.
You know what it is? They perform at track. They perform at big tracks because big tracks have got straights and then nice point, like it's point and shoot. But all these tracks that have like the long bends and stuff.
Go-kart tracks essentially, just like twisty and windy.
They have not been able to set up cars there since the last 10 years.
They did it right at Tassie, didn't they?
Yeah, but not like.
Yeah, but Tassie's point and shoot. It's 3 corners.
Yeah, true.
Obviously, Walkinshaw underperformed this year, but and even we were talking about Tickford underperforming, but I think some of this underperformance, I think, has to be attributed to improvements in other teams on the grid, particularly when you see Grove Racing and how well they've come on this year. They're literally taking another 2 spots out of the top 10.
Did you like my little point?
What was your point?
I said Grove Racing is hitting their groove.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was a bit of a poet.
They've been awesome.
They've actually, the last 2 weekends, especially, I can see them building some momentum. But there was one part I was actually found it quite humorous because SVG at the front, then there was Waters, there was Reynolds, Holdsworth, Mostert, and I think Anton all there. And I was like, this is nearly all of the new forward performance sort of of next year's racing or hunting SVG. And I was thinking, like, what other Chevy team is going to throw itself into the mix to really sort of like rattle that chasing pack? Because like we're going to have such I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself, but I just thought it was an interesting.
Heimgardner had a great race.
Heimgardner looked really good.
He's always pulls out a good race every now and then, but then some races he just gets mired. But I think that's
Brad Jones racing.
It's true. Yeah.
Like
so he had
the exact same problem. He was there.
He did have a good race. So I was pretty impressed with that one performance. But it's a good point because a lot of the chasing teams behind AAA are going to Ford performance. I think. Dick Johnson Racing, Shell V-Power. They've kind of come back in the pack a little bit. And Anton, ever since did he win a race at Sydney Motorsport Park this year?
No.
Yeah, I think so.
No.
Last year
he hasn't been as
no, they had a good race weekend last weekend, wasn't it?
I think he's just consistent.
They haven't been as consistent as I thought. Like they haven't been as high up as I thought, to be honest.
I think the
Wilbur had a great race.
I think every team other than AAA has got bogey tracks and they up and down and they take points off each other. Whereas the one consistent is that SVG is going to be in the top 2 every race. Like he's got he's got a 300 point lead already in the championship. And then there's 150 points between 2nd and 6th. You know what I'm saying?
But you know what? Like, it's interesting. Like he hasn't had a bad race yet, but he'll have a DNF and that will bring the championship back down.
He has to break his leg and miss a whole round because 300 points is a round.
I mean, like if say he has a DNF in one race,
that's 100 points.
150 points. You know what I mean? Like that's
100 points on one of these weekends with 3 races.
Oh well, 100 points then. You know, I'm sure that there's going to be
to smash at Bathurst.
But he's definitely pretty dominant. I think what I've realised is that the racing between McLaughlin when he was here and SVG, was
We took it for
something to
granted.
behold. Yeah, we did take it for granted because the fact that there was two of those drivers at that peak level and two teams that were able to perform at that level, and probably two
Dude,
drivers that took the cars beyond the level that they should have been performing to
But I
take
think
on
it
each
also
other.
shows how
It was pretty
good.
fantastic.
It also shows how good McLaughlin was, like in terms of the sport, because he was like when he was at the top, he was untouchable.
He was better than SVG.
He was
undoubtedly.
He was better than SVG, and then if SVG and Win Cup got a win, it was sort of a thing to write about. And but really, no one can touch SVG even half as much as they were touching McLaughlin.
Well, this is what
You know
I
what I
wanted
mean?
to probably have just a few minutes to chat about today. Do you think that all things being equal between SVG, Waters, and Mostert, like if they were all driving the same Triple Eight car, you think that would be all at the same level? Because like it's obvious, Tickford is not like, I think Waters is definitely pulling Tickford.
Tickford don't have enough good
Like-
drivers. I think like that's their biggest problem.
to push the team forward.
I think Walkinshaw's biggest problem is that they're racing a car that was designed by the team they're trying to beat, and that in itself has got its own problems. I mean, there is a reason why they don't want to be racing in the same car as Triple Eight, especially now that Triple Eight is doing all the R&D on that Camaro. Like,
but you can say the same thing for Tickford and
but it's not,
Penske,
because
Penske developed
Penske and Tickford had a when the Mustang was designed, it was a team effort. Like they had both sides involved in the designing process and the building process.
But it was definitely more skewered towards Penske.
Yeah, but you would want that because they were the better team at the time. But Walkinshaw is a proper customer of Triple Eight. I mean, and the other thing that Walkinshaw have, like at the start of the whole process of building up that car was nowhere close to Triple Eight, and over the years they keep cutting away, but they can never catch up because Triple Eight then make a step and they cut half of it, and then they get a bit closer and then they get a bit closer. And I think the other thing is that a lot of it is Chaz as well. Like Chaz is a
overperforming again. Yeah. Well, he did the same thing at Tickford.
He's doing Chaz things.
I guess to answer your question, Ant, from what I've seen, if they were all in the same car, it just seems that SVG is more consistent. He's just the same every lap, every race, every lap.
But I think like if you look at, like I'll keep talking about Waters because
You're a Tickford
follow
man.
him, yeah, but also because I'm looking at his lap times every lap. I mean, I could make the argument that he's extracting everything from the car, but the car has less to give than the Triple Eight. Do you know what I mean? Like when I watched him on the weekend, it was obvious that that he was like every lap was a perfect. Like he made one mistake on the second last lap, where he kind of went through the first turn a little bit too aggressively and he lost about 0.3 of a second. But apart from that, from a purely objective point of view, there was really nothing that he did wrong. He was just being chased by a driver in a car that was faster. Do you know what I mean?
Well, do you think if all three were in the same car?
I would love to see it. I couldn't tell you who was the best. And like as much as I like to give Mostert shit because his final year at Tickford, he cost us a Bathurst 1000. He's been awesome. He's been awesome for WAU. He's pulled up that team, and turned them into a team with some real, forward trajectory and upward trajectory moving into the new era of supercars. And you can't take that for granted. And then if you look at him even last week, right? So he's at the Bathurst 12-hour racing against some of the greatest GT3 drivers. You've got Ricciardo Fella in the same car. You had Kelvin van der Linde in the same car. Man, his first two sectors at Bathurst were down in qualifying, and he just still managed to put it on pole fairly convincingly. So there's no argument that in the broader spectrum of races internationally, the guy's got some huge talent. I just would love to see those three drivers all in the same car, just as an exercise in, where the really as an exercise to see how far behind Triple Eight those two chasing teams are.
Well, here's probably the interesting thing going into next year. You've got Van Gisbergen in Triple Eight. You've got De Pasquale in Dick Johnson Racing. You've got Waters in Tickford. You've got Reynolds in Grove, and then you've got Mostert in Walkinshaw. I think, give or take, you would say they're been the five best drivers in V8 Supercars over the last, say, 3 years, like consistently, and they're all in different teams. I mean, I think next year is going to be, fingers crossed, so interesting, because with how the whole engine parity has been worked and the way that these cars have been developed, I mean, you're taking away a lot of that, like, sort of factory feel from each team having sort of different ways of setting up cars. But what we're going to see is who is actually the best driver, or which team can set up the car the best from sort of the same baseline. Like there's not going to be like many tricks that teams can play and stuff, because everyone's using very, very similar machinery.
Yeah. Do you think? Sorry, one more thing. If SVG wins the championship again as convincingly as he did last year, is there any consideration in him to look elsewhere for a new challenge?
I think SVG. I think SVG could, but I think he'd do a different.
He's older. He's older than McLaughlin. That's the other thing.
I would see him going to do stuff like doing like some LMP racing, to do like a Le Mans, and then do some rallying and stuff, because he likes a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, I get the vibe that he's a supercars driver. He loves supercars, and he'll do bits and pieces here and there. But like I get sort of like a Win Cup vibe, like they're supercar drivers.
Yeah. But it's definitely interesting. I think that at the very least, what we can take away from this weekend of supercars was that Tickford, whether it's just qualifying pace, have had some upturn in fortune. It's definitely brought Waters back into the championship. I mean, he was sitting in 6th or 7th only a couple of race meets ago, and he's only 10 points or so behind De Pasquale now. I think it's just a handful of points. So he's definitely back in the championship consideration. I think Grove, if they keep on the trajectory that they're on, I mean, it looks like bringing in Cauchy was a inspired move. Bringing Holdsworth back in, he was a little bit shaky in the first 2 rounds, but he's definitely been pulling his weight in the team championship. So that team's looking fantastic. And I think, it was a little bit of a blip for WAU over the last two race meets. But if there's anything that we know about Mostert, is that, I think we go to Queensland Raceway in a couple of rounds. Are we racing at Queensland this year?
Townsville, that's first.
Well, Townsville is again a different track. That's a good track for Tickford. Just thinking about it, it's also a good track for Mostert. So hopefully they're able to again at least make it competitive. I don't care if SVG wins, but I don't want to see him winning by 10 seconds at the end of a race. So as long as they can keep it competitive, I think that's the most important thing for the sport as well. Just so it doesn't become, kind of an expectation before the race has even been run that there's not going to be any competition to it.
That procession.
Just quickly, before we end on the supercars, just quickly answer me this question then, because it was my last point. It was, do we think that pennies are being put away for the 2023 season in supercars, knowing that the end of this whole era is upon us, and sort of like, will teams be as interested, or not interested, but like, do you take the short-term game to put some cash aside for next year?
Limiting R&D.
Yeah, because it's like how much can you really gain? Like, even like to like, do you just go there and just use what you've got rather than sort of check? Like, because we know that like Triple Eight is already limiting their R&D for this year, and you can imagine other teams doing it, because why not, actually have more money in the bank for when like development on this new car and getting on top of it quicker is going to help you for many more years to come.
I think the further
next year,
The further SVG pulls ahead, I think the more teams will start doing that.
But I think something that has to be considered also is that like this current generation of car, most teams, it's old, and most teams have probably made all the
maxed out.
They've probably maxed out R&D, and each race meet now is just trying to maximize the packages that they have. I don't think that there's a lot more improvement to be made through engineering. Like, I might be wrong.
It's a minor improvement.
No, it's a good point.
So I think there's probably a point that they're not doing as much R&D anymore, but I don't think it's having as big an impact as one might think, because they've probably already maxed out, like they've got to the ceiling of these cars, and they are ready for the new cycle as well. So I don't know.
They're probably working on setups more than anything every weekend.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's enough, like if you look at Tickford, if you look at Walkinshaw, their setups have been, track to track have been chalk and cheese. So I think there's enough issues there just trying to get a good baseline to cater for these different circuits.
Something that's funny as well is that you've got like Grove now that's run by someone who's from AAA. You've got Premier Racing that's run by someone from AAA, but that's the same base car. Then you've got someone at so you've got Slade, what is it, Blanchard Racing? They've got someone from, like, all the guys who have changed teams are actually working on a different car than they used to as well. So like actually stealing a setup doesn't work. Like you can't just go, oh, this is what we did in this. Like even like Walkinshaw have Mozzie and DeBore, but they can't go, oh, when we were at Tickford we could do this in this situation because it's a totally different car. So like really like piggybacking that kind of knowledge that won't really work.
The other thing that we are seeing is that some of our smaller teams in the series are definitely more competitive, and the battle for the midfield, particularly with teams like Blanchard. Blanchard, realistically, they've taken a step back this year.
No, he's in the top 10, bro. He's 9th.
But he hasn't been like as competitive as he was. Like he hasn't been as far up the front as he was last year. Regardless. But I think you've got more teams. Matt Stone is more competitive. You've got Premier that have, considering it's their first year, have made like a 300% increase on what Techno were doing. And to consider that Techno had Fabian Coulthard as well, and they were languishing as low as they were, just shows how bad the team was. BJR are BJR. They're kind of always fluctuating. But it's definitely made the battle in the midfield much more competitive. And then you're also seeing that if a team like Tickford or a team like WAU isn't performing as well or isn't on their game in a particular round, it's not as easy to get into the top 5 as it used to be, which is good for the category, I think.
Definitely compressed. Like just everyone's performing at such a high level. You can't just blow by cars that you could have done 5 years ago. That used to be sort of an everyday commonplace kind of thing.
That's probably another example of how teams are kind of maxing out their performance levels of their car. So those teams that were performing lower in the past are now kind of catching up because there isn't as much ceiling for those front running teams to reach. Let's end on the just a quick synopsis on our experience of the Bathurst 12 hours. So we went up to Bathurst last weekend. 10 days ago, we put out the interview with Marcel from Valmont Racing, and that's really interesting interview. It's good to get the opinions of a gentleman driver. And on Sunday morning, we made the dreary and wet drive up to Bathurst. It was definitely not the easiest day to go up the mountain.
You got a behind the scenes look, but
mate, what an awesome day it was. We got to sit behind Valmont Racing's pit box for a couple of hours when it was raining. They were kind enough to let us, get out of the rain and in their the back of their garage, which was really awesome to see. They were a fantastic group of guys. The fact that they were so willing to talk to us and be hospitable to us as a bunch of no names when they're trying to obviously run a 12-hour race speaks volumes about them. But what was your opinions of the weekend, Joe?
I was genuinely not surprised. I was pleasantly surprised with the weekend. I mean, how do I say this nicely? I definitely had tempered my expectations for the weekend in itself, considering that there was such a like lack of sort of
There's
cars.
no depth of field, yeah.
Yeah, like we've been spoiled for choice for the last 3 years. We've gone up. We've had 40, 50 cars in the race, and we've had nearly every big factory GT sort of conglomerate come down every year. So it's sort of been GT fans' wet dream. So this year was a bit different.
Sky.
All wet dreams.
But I mean, I had said this to you before the race. I said, you better come with me because we have to put our sort of our money where our mouth is.
That's right.
In an event that we have got sort of our Australian teams putting on a show for us. And it's so easy for races to be forgotten after a couple of years if they're not on.
Well, I fell in that trap. I mean, obviously,
I know you did.
It's a long, like the reality is to make the commitment, like to go up there, it's like not an easy drive. It's not the hardest drive, but it's not easy to go up there for what was it, 16 cars, 14
19
cars, 19 cars. And, I didn't realize that initially I didn't realize that the field was so weak. And then obviously when I saw it, I'm like, oh, do I want to do that or do I want to go racing instead? But you did make a good point, and that was that the race hasn't been on for a while. It's definitely not ideal circumstances this year. And, realistically, the race hopefully, it should have been run in February, but because of, COVID, uncertain, they have to push it back. But you made a good point. And the point was that at least they got the race back on the calendar this year, and at least the race was run. And I think what we saw,
Dude,
regardless
it was still a good spectacle.
Exactly. Regardless of the size of the field, the spectacle of the race was awesome. We had a fantastic Australian story with Kenny Habul winning the race. The race was still super compelling, regardless of the fact there were less teams there. So I think that it was a huge win for the Bathurst 12-hour. And I mean, even though it was such a small field, to see drivers like Jules Gounon, Kelvin van der Linde, Ricardo Feller, Lucas Stoltz, Mario Engel, to see those caliber of driver still come down and then have to fly back to
Chris Mees.
Germany. Yeah, they had literally fly in, fly out back to race the next weekend in their regular GT3 categories. Does show how much respect there still is in the GT community for that track and for that race. So I think the fact that it's been run again has kind of rekindled the flame in the Australian population's hearts, but also in like the world GT3 community. And I'm, just can't wait to see the race run at its proper time in February when every racer from around the world can get around, and hopefully we have again, the grids that we've seen in the past. But yeah, I think
one thing as well that I really enjoyed that we always take for granted, I suppose, is the teams, like the small teams, Australian teams that are always there every year, but we don't really pay much attention to because we've got 4 Audis that are run by Audi Performance with the best Audi drivers from the world,
WRT and those kind of things.
And then we've got like Group M who bring 2 cars and that kind of stuff. So for the first time in a long time, I think probably since the first year we saw like the focus was on like Grove Racing with their Porsche. We had like Kenny Habul's Sun Energy car was one of them.
It was 888.
Yeah, so like you had even like the Hallmark Audi, Mark Seni's car, it's been there for how many years since I can remember. The Tony Bates Audi, like all these cars that you don't
Aussie
really
GT,
look at.
the Aussie GT3 championship cars,
they
right?
had their day in the sun. You know what I mean? I thought that was awesome. I really thought that was
in the
awesome.
clouds. It wasn't really that sunny. It was pretty. It was in the clouds.
They had their time on the big screen. They were the focus.
Yeah. Well, to finish all that, I think we need to kind of chat a bit about the Valmont boys. Now they had a bit of a setback, mate. It looked so sketchy in the morning, and both of those Mercedes-AMGs actually had the same mistake coming through the dipper, or it just seemed like there was no traction for that car coming through that corner, and they both had sustained what seemed like pretty minor damage, but it set them back for a couple of hours. I think what was the like really good to see was Paddy Archie in that Mercedes, and I would love to see him again racing for the team next year.
He looked like he belonged really well.
He did a really good job. He did a phenomenal job. And I think, their goal was just to go in and get some miles under their belt in preparation for next year's race. I think they've done that. The car looked phenomenal when it was on the track. And I, really looking forward to seeing what they're able to achieve. It's not even going to be a year. It's closer to 7 months.
6 months.
6 months till that race.
8 months actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not that long a wait. We have to till we get to see that race again. So awesome. It was
Hopefully
awesome that the race was back.
Drag Harry up. We'll have to pick him up so he can't bail.
Well, he should have been down there because he's the only one with fog lights on his car, and he didn't even make the trek up through the mist.
Yeah, that's right.
So you've got to put those fog lights to good use. Boys, we've clicked over, an hour 20 now. I think we'll leave it there for tonight. Always good having a chat with you.
Thank you very much.
We'll eagerly wait in anticipation for Ricciardo's bounce back race in Monaco.
Well,
He does perform. He does perform well at Monaco, so hopefully that's a good omen for the man with the shitty helmet. But I think we'll leave it there, boys. So I hope you have a great night. Thanks for jumping on. For anyone that's listening online, again, keep singing the same song to you, but please keep sharing the word, liking our socials, giving us a follow. Send us a few questions and hopefully we'll try to address them in the upcoming pods as well. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your support. Gents, have a great night. See you next week.
Thanks, boys.
Till next time, mate.